I never thought the day would come when the only person I loved unconditionally would look me in the eye and see more value in my death than in my life. My name is Jackson Reed, and the moment I realized my own blood was ready to poison me for money, something inside me shattered forever. The deal was finally done, and I wanted to mark the end of an era with the only family I had left. I booked a table at one of the most elegant restaurants in downtown Dallas, the kind of place with chandeliers that glowed like liquid gold and tablecloths crisp enough to snap. The air carried a low hum of jazz that blended with the soft clinking of glasses around us. Emily swept in with the confidence of someone used to being admired. The red dress she wore shimmered under the warm light, and for a fleeting moment, I thought of her as a child, when she used to grab my hand as we crossed the street. Mark followed close behind, his suit pressed sharp, his smile wide, but somehow rehearsed. We raised our glasses. Emily's voice rang clear, bright as a bell. "To Dad's new chapter." I clinked hers gently, though instead of champagne, I sipped the glass of iced tea the server had placed in front of me. The doctor had warned me months ago, no alcohol, no exceptions. The bitter chill of the tea was grounding, a reminder of how fragile everything had become. Conversation carried on easily for them. But for me, every laugh they shared felt like I was standing behind a pane of glass, watching from the outside. I wanted this dinner to be a bridge, a step towards something warmer. Yet there was a hollowness in their smiles that gnawed at me. When my phone buzzed, I excused myself, stepping into the quiet hallway to take the call from my attorney. It lasted only minutes, but when I returned to the table, my eyes fell on the glass of tea. A thin, cloudy film clung to the surface, catching the light in a way I hadn't noticed before. A chill slid down my spine. Something wasn't right. The dinner ended with polite smiles and a lingering hollowness that clung to me like smoke. Outside the restaurant, the air had cooled, carrying the faint scent of rain on asphalt. I watched Emily and Mark slip into their car, their silhouettes vanishing beneath the glow of the streetlights. As I turned toward my own vehicle, a light touch landed on my shoulder. Carlos, the server from our table, stood there, eyes darting nervously as if the shadows might overhear. His voice was a trembling whisper, urgent yet restrained. "Sir, please, don't drink your tea. I saw your daughter drop something in." For a heartbeat, everything around me blurred. My fingers trembled, curling into fists to keep them steady. Carlos reached into his apron and produced a clear plastic bag, sealed tight, the familiar glass of iced tea suspended inside. I kept it in case you needed proof. I couldn't stay quiet. I took the bag from him, the weight of it far heavier than the glass itself. His words rang in my ears as I walked to my car. Each step slow, unreal. "Your daughter." The phrase echoed inside me like a siren. By the time I slid behind the wheel, my knuckles were white around the steering wheel, the chill of betrayal settling into my bones. Morning light crept across my kitchen table as the glass in its sealed bag sat before me like an accusation. I drove straight to a discreet private lab on the edge of town, paid in cash, and told them to rush the results. Hours later, an envelope slid across the counter toward me. Inside, a single page spelled out a nightmare. Propranolol at a lethal dose. One swallow enough to stop my heart. I called Margaret, my oldest ally, and placed the report on her desk. She read it in silence, then exhaled slowly. "I've suspected for weeks," she said. "They're drowning in debt, credit cards maxed out, an SUV they can't pay off, the suburban house about to be foreclosed." I sat frozen, staring at the toxicology report, the lines of black text swimming on the page, all the years of sacrifice, all the sleepless nights to build something for my child, and now this. The distance between us wasn't just time or work. It was greed. It was darkness. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of what that meant. My own blood had planned my death to rescue a lifestyle built on sand. They arrived exactly on time, walking into the conference room as if nothing in the world were wrong. The fluorescent lights above cast a harsh, clinical glow over the polished wood table. Emily's pale blue dress caught the light with an almost innocent sheen, her smile carefully arranged like a mask. Mark trailed a step behind, his tie straight, his jacket crisp, but a bead of sweat slipped down his temple as he sat, without a word. I set the sealed plastic bag and the toxicology report in front of them. "Do you know what this is?" My voice was steady, almost too calm. Emily's shoulders tightened, her eyes flicked to Mark. He swallowed hard, his lips curling into a weak imitation of a grin. Margaret slid another folder across the table. "Mark, the Google searches about propranolol and cardiac patients. Those were yours, weren't they?" His jaw clenched, and the silence that followed was its own confession. Emily's eyes welled up. "Dad, how can you trust strangers over your own daughter?" Her tears flowed, but her gaze darted everywhere but at me. I could see through it now. Carlos's words echoed in my mind. This wasn't heartbreak. It was theater, and every line of it cut deeper than the last. Margaret laid down the final document, the pharmacy receipt under a false name. The last veil fell. Emily wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, and when she looked up, her eyes were no longer wet but cold, glassy. "You were never really there for me. You chose the business, the money, the glory. Now you're going to give it all away to a bunch of strangers, and I'm supposed to be left with nothing? If you're gone, at least I'll have a future." Her words hit harder than any poison. Mark hissed at her. "Stop talking like that." But it was too late. The truth hung between us like smoke. I sat back, the report trembling in my hands. It wasn't the drug that made my chest ache. It was hearing my own child weigh my death like an investment. In that moment, I knew something inside us had snapped, and there would be no mending it. Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain after Emily's bitter words. I could have pulled out my phone and dialed 911, watched them both hauled away in handcuffs, let the world know what they'd tried to do. But the image of flashing headlines, my family's name dragged through the mud. The legacy I'd built turned into gossip, made my stomach twist. I drew a slow breath and reached into my briefcase, sliding a thick packet of papers onto the table. "I have enough evidence to put you both in prison," I said, my voice low but steady. "But I'm not going to do that. Instead..." Margaret pushed 2 copies of the confession across to them. Every line spelled out their plan, their signatures binding them to the truth. If I died suddenly, every page would go straight to the police. Emily's face hardened. She snatched up the pen, then hurled it back down. "You won't. You'd never destroy your own daughter." I met her eyes without blinking. "You destroyed yourself the moment you slipped that powder into my glass." She faltered for just a second, then looked away. I leaned forward. "I'll pay off every debt you've run up, every credit card, every overdue payment, but on one condition. From this moment, you disappear from my life. No calls, no visits, no more money. You're done." The color drained from her cheeks. Mark sat frozen, staring at the papers as if they might bite him. The air in the conference room tightened, humming with unspoken panic. Emily's hand trembled as she picked up the pen again. This time, she pressed it to the page. Mark followed, sweat streaking his temples, his signature jerking across the lines. The sound of their pens scratching was like the rasp of shovels burying something deep. They slid the papers back to Margaret. I sat there watching, feeling as if I were attending a funeral with no body, just the death of what had once been between us. Emily stood, smoothing her dress, and glanced over her shoulder. Her smile was crooked, her eyes flat. "You think you've won? You'll die alone." Her words hit like the last blade. I stayed seated, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles whitened. I had buried my daughter without soil or stone, just ink and paper. In the quiet that followed, Margaret rested a hand on my shoulder. "Some people can't be saved, Jackson, not even by their own blood." I nodded, but inside, a cavern opened, cold and endless, where my daughter's face used to be. The days after that meeting bled into each other, color draining from everything I touched. Papers from the confession sat locked in Margaret's safe, but their weight pressed against my chest as if I carried them inside me. I moved through my routines on autopilot, checking mail I didn't care about, answering calls I barely heard. The house by the lake felt larger than ever, its silence a living thing curling around my ankles. At night, the water outside turned black and still, a mirror to what I felt inside. I sat on the porch with a mug in my hands, steam rising into the cold air like a ghost I couldn't hold on to. The wind whispered through the bare branches, a sound that came to me like a chorus of accusation. Alone. Alone. Each gust rattled the railing as if knocking, reminding me of everything I'd lost. My fingers trembled around the ceramic, coffee cooling against my palms. I thought of Emily's face across that table, of the way she spat out her confession like venom, of how easily she weighed my death against her comfort. The same child I once hoisted on my shoulders at county fairs, the one I promised to protect through every storm, had calmly plotted my absence from the world. The house creaked behind me, empty except for the echo of footsteps that would never return. In that moment, the ache spread deeper than my chest. It reached my marrow. I had not only lost Emily, I had lost the belief that being a father could ever be enough to hold someone's love. I stared out at the dark water until my eyes blurred. For the first time in my life, the question came uninvited, cold and heavy. If I disappeared tomorrow, who would notice? The money was there, the legacy intact, but everything it was meant to protect had already slipped away. The porch light flickered, and a gust swept across the lake, carrying a scent of rain and wood smoke. I gripped the railing to steady myself. On the other side of the glassy surface, my reflection stared back, older, hollow-eyed, and unrecognizable. I stood at the edge of something I couldn't yet name, a drop-off so steep it felt like a cliff inside me. The night didn't answer, only the wind, whispering again, as if to ask why I was still here. A year had passed since that day in Margaret's office, yet the echo of Emily's words still haunted me like a ghost. I poured everything into the foundation, long hours drafting programs, vetting proposals, cutting ribbons at small community projects, anything to keep the silence of my house from swallowing me whole. I built something outwardly bright, but inside I still carried a hollow place where my daughter's love had once lived. One cool spring morning, Margaret poked her head into my office. "There's someone here to see you," she said softly. "She's not on the schedule, but you should meet her." The young woman who stepped inside carried an air of composure I hadn't seen in years. Dark hair pulled back neatly, a well-worn briefcase tucked under her arm, and eyes bright with a kind of quiet determination. She sat across from me, set the case down, and said without preamble, "My name is Lily Carter. I'm 25. I'm a biomedical researcher, and I've been a recipient of your foundation scholarship for 2 years." Her voice was clear, but there was a tremor at its edge. She reached into the briefcase and pulled out a photograph, the edges soft and yellowed with time. She slid it across the desk toward me. Emily at 17 stared back at me, holding a tiny bundle swaddled in a faded blanket. My breath caught. "I'm your granddaughter," Lily said, her gaze steady, not pleading. "Emily is my mother." The room tilted. All the years I had believed I knew my family, all the sacrifices, the nights alone building a future. I had never imagined another branch of blood existing just out of reach. Emily, pregnant at 17, had handed this child to strangers, and I had been left in the dark. I looked up at Lily, searching for some sign of a trick, but there was none. Only honesty. She went on quietly, filling the silence with the pieces of a story I hadn't known was mine. She had grown up in a small Ohio town, raised by a teacher and a hotel manager who gave her a warm, steady home. They had told her from the start she was adopted. When she turned 25, they encouraged her to find her roots, telling her that knowing where she came from was a gift, not a threat. "I'm not here to ask for money," she said, leaning forward, her fingers interlaced. "I only wanted you to know you're not as alone as you think. You didn't lose everything. I'm still here." Her words slid under my skin, not as an accusation but as a balm. For a moment, the weight I'd been carrying cracked. I saw not just the outline of a stranger, but the reflection of something I thought had died, a chance at family, a bridge to a future that wasn't entirely made of absence. I reached for the photograph. My hands trembled as I traced the shape of Emily's young face, the tiny head resting against her shoulder. My voice came out rough. "All this time," Lily's eyes softened. "I wanted to meet you sooner, but when I tried to contact her, she turned me away. She said that part of her life was over." The words landed like a dull ache, but behind them, a new current rose. The shadows that had lived in me since Emily's betrayal shifted, just enough to let light in. Here, in front of me, sat proof that not everything she had touched was lost. For the first time in a year, my chest loosened. The photograph lay between us like a thread, thin but unbroken, pulling me forward. In that instant, the darkness inside me tore open, and through it I glimpsed a life that still had room for something new. The morning of the dedication broke bright and clear, the kind of spring day that seemed designed for beginnings. The banners had been hung across the iron gates, bold letters spelling out the David Reed Community Center. The building behind them gleamed with fresh paint. The playground sparkled with its new swings and slides, and the garden, my one request, stood alive with color, a place where children could run without fear. By the time I arrived, the grounds were already filled. Families wandered the pathways, children laughed and shrieked as they chased each other across the grass, and volunteers handed out lemonade in paper cups. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the noise wash over me. A year ago, silence had been my only companion. Now, the air rang with life. Lily appeared at my side, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her eyes glowing with pride. She wore no fancy clothes, just a simple dress and a lanyard identifying her as one of the coordinators. When she smiled at me, the hollowness that had ruled my life for so long cracked again. The ceremony was simple. Margaret spoke first, her voice strong, thanking the donors, the workers, the community. Then she stepped aside and gestured for me. I approached the microphone, my heart pounding as dozens of eyes turned toward me. I cleared my throat. For years, I thought success meant building something that carried my name, trucks on highways, contracts signed, money in the bank. But today I understand legacy differently. Legacy isn't what you own, it's what you give. My voice faltered, but I pressed on. This center carries my late wife's name because she believed in people, not profit. I hope it becomes a place where children feel safe, where families find hope, and where no one ever feels alone. Applause rose, warm and genuine. But what seared itself into me was not the clapping. It was the single word Lily whispered as she leaned close enough for only me to hear. Grandpa. Just one word, and something inside me broke open. For so long, I'd believed Emily's betrayal had ended everything, that there was nothing left but an empty house, an empty name. Yet here was her daughter, flesh of my blood, standing by me. Emily was gone from my heart, but through Lily, I had a family again. A new chapter I hadn't dared imagine. Later, after the speeches and the ribbon cutting, after the crowd had thinned and the children had scattered to explore their new home, I walked the hallways alone. Sunlight spilled across the polished floors. On the walls hung murals painted by local artists, bright skies, strong trees, hands reaching for one another. It struck me that this place wasn't just brick and mortar. It was proof that something good could grow out of devastation. That evening, I drove back to my house by the lake. The sky was ablaze with orange and rose, the water catching the light in molten ripples. I carried a glass of tea to the porch, sat down, and listened to the gentle slap of waves against the shore. The wind shifted, cool against my face, carrying the echoes of the laughter I'd heard that morning. I thought of Emily, how far she had drifted, how finally she was gone. But I also thought of Lily, of her steady voice and unwavering presence. Out of the ashes of betrayal, she had given me a reason to breathe again. I whispered into the dusk, not to anyone in particular, but to the universe itself. From the ashes of betrayal, a new fire can rise, and this time, I'll live to keep it burning. The sun dipped below the horizon, but instead of darkness pressing in, I felt the warmth linger, as if the day refused to let go. And for the first time in years, I leaned back, not fearing the night, but welcoming whatever tomorrow might bring. The story did not end with loss. It ended with legacy, with hope, and with the word that had healed me more than I thought possible: Grandpa.